Okay, hello everyone. This is my little follow-up video from our open office hours session just now. I'm sorry to everyone that was sitting. I was like sitting on the Zoom thinking no one had jumped on yet, and then I realized that I needed to let you all in the weight room. So now I know there's a waiting room for that. So sorry about that. So we started about 5 minutes late. Okay, so there are some things I wanted to just relay to everyone in case you weren't able to jump on this morning. Um, okay, first one, word limit. There's been some clarification about the word limit. I have added some information on Moodle as well. And also, if you have already downloaded the scoping review assignment with the grading rubric. I haven't changed any of the like percentages. I've just changed some of the wording on the left-hand column, just kind of describing how I'm going to be grading for the different sections. But I made some little tweaks in accordance with the implications section that AJOT has. So just flagging that for you. Um, but sorry, going back to the word limit. So for the word limit, I am making an exception for you all that's a little different than the author guidelines, basically to give you more leeway. Um, for AJOT, they usually, so to be clear, I am going to have you follow the word limit guidelines for systematic reviews because that affords you the most word count, basically. Because I know you all I think I've had different metrics up to this point, so I just want to give you the most leniency with that. Systematic reviews on for most journals are given kind of like exceptions to word counts because systematic reviews can be so wordy, essentially. And so, for instance, you'll see in the author guidelines that I've given you for AJOT, the word limit is 5,000 words. But then there's a little like A asterisk, and it says below that for systematic review, the 5,000 words does not have to include your references and your tables. And so for us, that's going to be the case for you. So when you do your word count, and that again is a maximum. So you can have less than 5,000, you can have 2,000, 3,000, whatever you think you need to sufficiently, answer your question and speak to your sources, etc. But your maximum is 5,000, but you can exclude resources and tables. And again, just for your knowledge, and if you're really reading the guidelines correctly, AJOT actually doesn't do it that way for scoping reviews. For scoping reviews, they actually ask you to include references and tables because inherently scoping reviews tend to be a little less volume than systematic reviews, I guess. But yeah, so I have put a little section on Moodle clarifying that, putting that into writing for you all. Also, along with a PDF showing you where in the author guidelines that is described and highlighting it, and then describing how we're essentially doing differently. So reach out if you have any questions. That's the update on the word limit. Okay, and then so in that little blurb just now, I also spoke to the implications section. So AJOT has a section. It's very specific to AJOT. Different journals, they have different focuses. Obviously, the American Journal of Occupational Therapy is largely focused towards an audience of OTs. I mean, really, that's a lot of the times the folks that are at least regularly looking at materials from there. And so all articles coming from AJOT, it's specified in their guidelines that they want to have an implication for occupational therapy section. And they want this after your discussion section and before your conclusion. So for other journals, for instance, for my journal for OT and healthcare, that implications part was not its own section. It was like embedded into my conclusion. Because really for anything like where there's like translational info for us, like clinically relevant info, you want to try to speak to that, especially if it's in your question, like, how is this relevant for OT practice? You definitely want to speak to that in your conclusion then, right? But I really like AJOT's little section, and they have a pretty fleshed out description too of how to construct that section. So that's something new or you might need to construct, or if you have implications, you're just going to need to pull them up into that section. Okay, other new sections you're most likely going to be writing are the abstract. That's why I included a lot of different resources for constructing your abstract, but then the final kind of metric is, of course, the author guidelines for abstract for AJOT, if that makes sense. So like your structure, what to include, word limit, we're going to be following AJOTs. But I gave some other kind of general info about writing abstracts. And then I believe you still need to write your conclusion. So you'll be doing that conclusion too. Okay. Other questions that came up that I wanted to just relay to everyone. Some folks have had challenges with getting like immediate access to a new source, a new article. If that's happening, you just might have to request it through the Interlibrary Loan Program. It basically just means that we don't have that in the agreements that Pacific University has in place. We just don't have that journal on like immediate access. And it sounds like that is the case for AJOT. So if you're not a member of AJOT, it's going to require a interlibrary loan request. The time frame on those, in my experience, I mean, granted, this was at a different institution, but it can vary. And I think there's a lot of factors in what makes those come through quick. Like it can come through the same day or it could come through another day. So if you're having any issues around that, just reach out to me and I'll help you. And we're going to make it work for whatever makes sense with the timeline that we're working with. Okay. So any challenges with access to articles or sources, first attempt is just reach out to the library, see if you can get it through that loan program, ask the librarian any questions you have. But if it seems like that's not kind of an immediate answer and you're feeling like if you're rerunning your searches and you feel like there's a pretty important source that you want to try to include, just shoot me an email and we can see what we can do. But otherwise, yeah. Okay, next thing to touch on is who will be grading your scoping reviews. So I know you all have had kind of a series of different feedback, even all the way back to like your initial literature review, which, by the way, you probably have experienced this. Maybe for some of you, your literature review wasn't even in the same area as your scoping review. Totally okay. So at this point, you're going to be integrating that feedback from Hannah that you got at the end of your last evidence-based 2 course. And then we're going to be doing the peer review process. And then you're also going to get feedback from me and Sinclair. So me and Sinclair are the like evidence-based team now. And so to try to speed up the feedback and get you guys the feedback faster, I have very thankfully and happily recruited Sinclair to help with that. So you'll get to either have feedback from me or Sinclair. I am going to upload an example of how we're doing the feedback. I think it's really cool. I was telling folks that past instructors have told me that there's been great feedback on this process. It's basically one of the few times that you'll get feedback on how you give feedback, which is a skill, right? You may be asked to be a reviewer for a journal, somewhere down the line. And so it's good to know how you're doing with that process. So I'm going to upload a document from a prior student. I just got approval from them to be able to share with you. And it's going to show, it wasn't me, it was Jen, but I'm using the same process that Jen used. It's going to show how we're going to do it. So it's going to show the peer feedback in the comments in the Word document. And then underneath, it's going to show how Jen then came in and gave comments. So me and Sinclair are going to do the same process. And speaking to that, that is different than how you will do for an actual review of a manuscript for a journal, unfortunately. So we're not perfectly mimicking the whole process here, but it is because it is for your benefit, because I think this is a really nice way to do it. But just a little FYI, I included on Moodle an example of a review that I did for a manuscript. I gave that example just so you could kind of see some of the content, like what some of your feedback, like how it can look and what type of things to comment on as you give feedback for your peer. But the structure of that is different than how we're doing it. But the structure of that is how you typically would do it if you're reviewing for a journal. I hope that makes sense. Okay, reach out if you have any questions, but that won't be until the peer review part, which is in a couple days. Okay, the last thing has to do with the knowledge translation project. So for anyone who's kind of looking ahead to that and thinking about that, there was a question about whether your kind of problem that you're identified, does it need to be related to your capstone, especially since we've been kind of trying to like match you up in pairs related to your capstone. And the answer is no, it does not. Mostly I was just using this based off feedback too from prior classes, just in case it's helpful for some folks. So maybe half of you will have a knowledge translation problem that will be related to your capstone. And so you'll be getting to know more sources, more resources, more evidence that is related to your population or whatever you're looking at. But for some of you, maybe it's just going to be a new interesting problem related to OT that you're going to dive into here for a couple weeks and present on. So either or is totally okay. Yeah, we were just using that as a way to pair you guys in case there was kind of that alignment, but it doesn't have to be the case. In past years, folks have just totally been randomly paired up. So okay, those are all the main points that we touched on in the open office session, and we will be having another open office session on Wednesday at 3 p.m., the same as Jen did. I will be admitting you right away from the get-go at 3 o'clock this time. Sorry about that. And similar structure, my open office session. So I will leave you with this. I know I had a chance to kind of check in with Jen and talk about how things went, and she had a lot more kind of like stuff to like get your head around. And so her open office sessions even ended up having like structure, it sounded like, where you do breakout rooms and you'd work on kind of like a concept. This class is such a kind of like doing class. I honestly don't really know how or if it would even be helpful to do that. So the way I'm just going to kind of structure the open office hours going forward, so you all know, and I'll do a better job on Wednesday with this, is I'm first going to kind of take topics and not start talking to them, which I actually did today. I just started answering the questions. But so in the beginning, I'll just kind of take questions, take some notes, field all the questions, and then answer them towards the end. And I want to do that mostly in case folks need to jump on later and so they don't miss stuff. I think one of the reasons I started answering is it was fine, but like the flow of questions wasn't all at once. It seemed like the more we started talking about things, then other folks came up with new questions. So we're going to have to just go with it. We're going to go with it on however it works. So no set structures for these open office hours. The only one that will be pretty set will be the quantitative assessment on Monday, February 10th. I will share my screen and I'll walk you all through that process. Okay, this video is getting long. I'm going to end with that, and maybe I'll see some of you Wednesday, and I hope you have a wonderful time revisiting your scoping reviews. And shoot me any email or question that you have or need for clarification. Okay.